king of Egypt would build a tomb. And Merneptah built his tomb in the Valley of the Kings. It's known as KV8. It's a very long tomb. Don't forget, he was co-regent for 12 years. So this is a 22-year project to build his tomb. And remember that from the time of Horemheb, they would cut, plaster the walls, decorate, and when it was finished, they would carry on. And then they would create chambers and tombs and that sort of thing as the work progressed. So it's a very long tomb, but it did suffer with, well, first of all, the king was reburied. So someone tried to rob it, or the priest robbed it, and they relocated his burial in Amenhotep's II's tomb in KV35, which became a cache for lots of royal mummies during the Third Intermediate Period. Interestingly, the tomb makers, or the miners, the builders are not building, are they? Mining and decorating, really. That's what they're doing. They use the same sort of text that was in Ramesses II's tomb and Seti I's tomb. So they're following along those guidelines, which would make the work a lot easier because each generation would have absorbed the skills of their fathers to do this work more efficiently. So you have the litany of Ra there in this tomb. Real magical text to give you power, energy, rebirth. The Book of Doors and the Book of Gates. Those secret spells you needed to get past those guardians in front of those gates and doors. The Book of Anduits to get through that duat, the rebirth, to visit the gods. And then the Book of Caverns, to overcome those deadly trials that you'd have to face. So all of that was in this tomb. So when the priests moved the mummified remains of Merneptah, they probably took off the wooden doors, and because wood was expensive in ancient Egypt. Remember, most of their trees in their landscapes are date palm trees, which are not suitable for making doors and furniture. So they took off the doors, and you got about 100 flash floods hitting that tomb, pushing debris down the mountain, plus the chippings that have been left outside of the tomb by the miners, and all of that gets pushed down these descending passages into these different rooms, and it scrapes off all that wonderful work which the artisans and the scribes have produced. And so you've got a mixture when you go and visit this tomb. You've got lots of bare walls where all that scrapings have been happening with 100-odd flash floods in the Valley of the Kings. And then you've got areas that have survived where the stones didn't rub off the beautiful plaster work and pictures that were painted on there. So you've got a mixture of both when you go and visit this tomb. So the Third Intermediate Period, the priests reburied Merneptah's body in Amenhotep II's tomb, and it became a royal cache. And then the tomb was left from the Third Intermediate Period. Well, you know, that was a long time. So in 1737, Richard Pocock, a British guy who's on a grand tour, visits the Valley of the Kings, and he goes inside this tomb. So if you can imagine what it was like when he went inside the tomb, it's full of rubble, and he's clawing his way, trying to see what's in this tomb. And it gives it a go for about a year to see if he's looking for mementos, things to take back to Britain. Look what I got in the Valley of the Kings, that sort of thing. Then in 1799, when Napoleon invaded Egypt to deny Britain a route to India for the spice markets, he took along lots of scholars, and they entered this tomb in order to map it. But they didn't get very far because, again, all those tons of debris. It's time consuming, removing all that, going through all the materials, seeing if there's any splinters of wood and shards of pottery and that sort of thing. It takes a long time to do that. Anyway, they went in the tomb in 1799. Then 1825, James Burton, who was a classical scholar, some people describe him as an Egyptologist, he visited the tomb. Just to visit, again, crawling over all those shards, trying to find what's going on in this tomb. Then in between 1825 and 1835, Robert Hayes, a Scottish classical scholar, or also described as an Egyptologist, worked in this tomb, removing the shale rubble from the 100-odd floods from antiquity. Then in 1826, 1827, Edward Lane, who was a scholar, visited the tomb, probably again to see if what was in there, because so much rubble, as you can see from the map, it's really deep. It was probably curiosity. Then in 1844 to 1845, Carl Lepsius, who was an archaeologist, had a go. And, you know, removing rubble and trying to sort of fathom how deep this tomb is. But he only tried for one season. And I think it was resources and outcome. Can you imagine, you go to this tomb, several people have been there before, and you go down that descending passageway, and there it is, this mound of rubble, and it goes on for maybe 20 meters. So maybe there's that much of a gap in the ceiling where you can scramble over. But you know, as an archaeologist, that it's not what's beyond there. This is the job. You've got to go through all this rubbish. It's all got to be taken out. So under the terms of licenses in Egypt during the 18th and 19th century, you had to get a license to do this. And on the license, it would say you have to employ 10 local Egyptians to do the work. It was like job creation. The idea was to get the local population, to get them to buy in on these ancient sites so they'd stop robbing them. So you've got this workforce that you've got to pay, and the custom in Egypt, just like it is today, is that whoever you employ, you've got to pay, you've got to provide them with a breakfast before they start work and their lunch. So you've got to feed them. So you've got to have cooks. You've got to have someone buying the supplies. You've got to have a place to cook the food and another place to present it. So all of this is time consuming and very expensive. And in archaeology, we rely on money from teaching about the subject or publishing books. Otherwise, there is no funding. So those were the sources of income for archaeology at the time, just like it is today. So many institutes rely on fees from teaching students to fund their expeditions, and that's why they don't have many expeditions, and an expedition is usually for 10 days. In those days, the season started in October and you finished the following April. That was an archaeological season in Egypt. Now you're lucky if you've got 10 full days. So it was very time consuming and very expensive. But in 1903, Hal Carter, who is aged 29, he's been in Egypt for 12 years. He came at 17. and he's been living and working in Egypt for 12 years now. He's 29 years of age, and he is head of antiquities for Upper Egypt. So he has a go at this. He's got resources. It's not going to cost him a fortune. It's going to be paid by the government. Nice. Okay. And he did quite a lot of work, archaeology work for the Antiquities Service. He put in safeguarding measures for this tomb. In other words, he made it safe. And his idea was that that you could present this tomb to the public, to the paying public, and it would produce income which would pay for the archaeological survey which he did, and it would safeguard the future. And of course it would employ people, local people, who would then get involved. So that's his idea. And he spent a year on it. You know, that's not a great deal of time in archaeology, but he had thousands of sites as the head of the Antiquities Service for Upper Egypt. So a terrible responsibility. And in 1985, the American University in Cairo got involved under Edwin Brock, who's an American archaeologist, and they were there for a good 3 years. So in 1985, Edwin Brock for the American University of Cairo, an American archaeologist, had a go at it. And he did everything that he needed to do to make it accessible for the public to visit and record the archaeological data. So that has been the most recent work, and to a very high professional standard. So with the death of Merneptah, who was buried in his tomb in the Valley of the Kings, then in the Third Intermediate Period, his body was moved to Amenhotep II's tomb, and he was succeeded by his son, who became Seti II. Now, if you are enjoying these videos, I'd be grateful if you could press the subscribe button and encourage people you know to come and visit the channel and view these videos. If you've got any comments you'd like to leave or suggestions, please could you leave them in the comments box. It's difficult for me to access comments, but I do like to read them. It gives me some ideas. And stay safe, get a haircut like I did, and I'll see you very soon. Bye for now.